As authorities in El Salvador's capital, San Salvador, hunt for gang members across the city. Some are hiding in this church, like wolves in a henhouse. Though these guys actually want out of the violent world that's almost destroyed them. Says Pastor Will Gomez, a former gang member himself deported from Los Angeles, who says this building is the only safe refuge left for these young men. For example, one who left here recently was murdered by rival gang members just outside the front door.
If they were to walk out that door, they have three options. Number one, they could get killed. Number two, they could go back to prison. And number three, they could end up back in the gang.
The number 18 tattooed on their faces represents a faction of the murderous 18th Street Gang, Barrio 18 Revolucionarios, one of El Salvador's most violent maras. At war for years now with arch rival Mara Salvatrucha, or MS-13. Gangs in El Salvador began tattooing their faces in the 1990s to tell each other apart in a sea of newly arriving gangsters deported here from cities across the United States. The 18th Street Gang actually got its name from Los Angeles, California, from the gang-ridden neighborhoods around 18th Street and Union in the shadows of downtown LA, where Will Gomez once roamed as an 18th Street gang member from Los Angeles back in the day, before being deported to his native El Salvador more than a decade ago. It's Will's street cred as a former gang member in LA that resonates with these young men here looking to turn their lives around.
I was over there and I got shot about 4 or 5 times, being involved in gangs, including once in my head.
Will's remarkable odyssey, what he calls his journey to hell and back, began in the 1980s when his parents fled El Salvador's civil war that claimed 75,000 lives. Will's parents arriving in the U.S. without legal documents, with thousands of other Salvadoran refugees that settled in an area near downtown Los Angeles designated as the El Salvador Corridor. Will's mother initially leaving him behind in San Salvador with her family, but he soon rejoined his father and mother in LA when they got settled, though the stress his parents endured living here as refugees without legal documents caused them to separate.
So my father ended up, leaving my mom. Yeah.
Did he say anything to you when he left?
Yeah, I remember that the day he was leaving, he grabbed me in his arms and he was like, "Look, man, I'm gonna have to leave again, but I love you." And I remember I was just crying and telling him, "Daddy, I don't want you to leave, I love you." But he left. I guess that affected me a lot.
Will says his mother worked 2 jobs and was seldom home, unable to pick him up from school like other children here.
I was just a Salvadorian kid, trying to fit in, But I guess the fact that I was always alone at home, I had no one to tell me right from wrong. I used to walk home and, I used to see all the graffiti, and I used to like this one particular girl, and she was a gang member. I tried to get her to talk to me, and eventually she did. She started talking to me. But once she found out where I lived, she called her homeboys, and after school, they jumped me, because I lived in the wrong neighborhood. And next time you know, I was like, just like F it,
So he then joined the 18th Street Gang. All the while, he says, knowing gang life would lead to trouble. Also, at this time, he had become a young father at the age of 17.
I was 17, my girlfriend was 15, and we had a kid. We were kids having kids. I wanted to change. I wanted a better tomorrow, a better future for him. I didn't want him to follow the same path, that I followed.
By the time Will's son was 6 years old, Will would be deported.
I committed a crime, attempted murder.
What was the attempted murder? Like an assault or?
Well, it was a shootout. between gangs. When they told me I was gonna get deported, I called my mom, my family. I told them that I was gonna get deported. And just hearing my mom crying over the phone and telling me what's gonna happen with you over there and we're never gonna see you again. And I called my kid and I told my kid, I love you, but I'm gonna have to leave. I don't know if I'm ever gonna see you again. It just broke my heart. But then I knew that I had to pay some for all the wrong things that I did in the past.
Will's family back here in El Salvador wanted nothing to do with him when he returned. So he ended up joining the 18th Street Gang here, quickly landing in prison for 10 years after being caught with a gun. Then, he says, hitting rock bottom when he was diagnosed with tuberculosis.
I was vomiting blood. I was in there dying. And during that process, during that situation, that I realized that I needed to do something. Like, I didn't want to die like that.
Fortunately, Will would recover and eventually make it out of prison alive, and was invited here to Ebenezer Church by former gang member Raul Valladares, who Will says saved his life.
Raul, he was the first one over here.
A former gang member?
A former ex-gang member. He was already removing his tattoos, and when I saw that, I was like, then it's possible, it's possible to help people out. So I started making the contacts, and I started picking these people up, bringing them over here, and now it has become a shelter, where they could have food, a place where to sleep, a roof over their heads. They're safe in here.
In the basement of the church, a bakery business was launched to give these young men a way to make a few dollars each day.
Right here, we have a bakery. We bake bread, and we sell that bread. Pizza, and all kinds of different, items.
Selling their baked items in a local marketplace, one of the rare occasions Will says that he and the men will venture outside. Those with facial tattoos using makeup to cover them before leaving here.
Now I see these men that just got out of prison with a bunch of tattoos. Their family don't want them around. The law, they want to put them back in prison. They receive discrimination from society. They cannot get a job because of their background. I see like a picture. Like when I look at them, I look at myself in the mirror. In reality, what these people is doing is just looking for a second chance.
Their story of how they're changing their lives may play well inside this building, but outside, on the streets, the general public has little confidence that an estimated 60,000 other gangsters here will change their ways for the better anytime soon. Gang members the current U.S. president regularly warns may sneak across the country's southern border, justifying what he says is an urgent need to complete the border wall. What about those like Trump, like his supporters, who have no sympathy for any of these people? People like you've done all these crimes, they don't want you there, and they don't want you coming back, or they don't want you coming at all. What do you say to them?
I understand that laws are created to be respected, to put some order in this world. I don't blame Donald Trump or anyone helping him out. I mean, I'm not gonna criticize him or judge him, but I believe that we gotta understand that we are all humans.
What also needs to be understood, says veteran Salvadoran journalist Ivan Manzano, is it was the U.S. government's support for El Salvador's government during the country's civil war back in the 1980s that ultimately helped create the gang problem in El Salvador in the first place, when Salvadoran refugees fled to the U.S., only later to be deported back to El Salvador. Many of them, Manzano says, young men returning to a broken post-war country with no jobs or way to support themselves and their families, joining street gangs to survive, locked in a gang war ever since.
Tengo 32 años de ser periodista, tengo 54 años de vida y nunca he conocido la paz en El Salvador. El problema de la violencia se da porque comienza a partir de la deportación de pandilleros de Estados Unidos a un país donde con otra cultura diferente a la de Estados Unidos. Son pandillas que nacieron en Los Ángeles, pero que vienen a dar a barrios aquí empobrecidos por el sistema sin oportunidades de empleo. Entonces, claro, lo que va a haber es violencia, porque donde hay pobreza siempre va a haber violencia.
El Salvador has one of the highest murder rates in the world. For example, the population here smaller than New York City, but they had 10 times more murders here in 2018, with 3,500 homicides.
Este es un periódico bien popular que se llama Michero y reporta que al menos 20 homicidios ocurrieron entre el sábado y el domingo aquí en El Salvador, en diferentes partes del Salvador. Tenemos grupos de prensa donde estamos en contacto todos los periodistas, socorristas y otra gente que tienen que ver con la violencia, y aquí nos enteramos todos por WhatsApp cuando hay un homicidio, en qué lugar, si es un doble homicidio, si es un triple, un cuádruple.
Presently, heavily armed police anti-gang units in San Salvador have arrived in this neighborhood controlled by 18th Street gang members who ambushed a police officer and shot him dead.
Policía asesinado a balazos por pandilleros en Santa Teresa de las Flores.
The killing of a police officer here today, one of a dozen murders across El Salvador during another very long, brutal day of gang warfare.
El Salvador está como atrapado en las oldies. Mucha gente le gusta aquí la música en inglés. Y más con la colonia que de salvadoreños en Estados Unidos. Estamos dolarizados. Nuestra moneda ahora es el dólar. Estamos conectadísimos con El Salvador, con Estados Unidos. Conectadísimos. Andy Williams.
In the end, says Manzano, El Salvador and the United States sharing a legacy of gang violence that largely began with U.S. deportations of Salvadorans that continue in large numbers today. Young men like Jose Baradas, a recently deported 18th Street gang member from Los Angeles, who showed up here when he heard about Will's efforts to help these young men quit gang life. Jose left behind his young daughter Jaylene back in Los Angeles when he was deported.
That's my baby prison right there. Hopefully she's doing good, you know, she's going to school, and I'm over here, you know, like, we work, you know, like, I don't do no more drugs, you know, like, I don't drink, you know, none of that.
And whatever happened to Will's son left behind in LA all those years ago? Well, Mark Anthony is all grown up today, who's stopped talking to Will and has now gone missing, says Will, on the streets of Los Angeles.
The same story all over again.
And what do you imagine him doing, or do you know what he's up to or what he's doing?
I know exactly what he's up to, and that's what breaks my heart, you know, that I'm down here.
Will believes, given his situation, he will never be able to return to Los Angeles to find his son. The only option, he hopes, is that Mark Anthony possibly one day visits him here in El Salvador.
What would you say to your boy?
I just want to tell you that I love you a lot, Mark, and that I'm never gonna give up on you. I never gave up on you before, and I'm not gonna do it now. I know that it's my fault, some of the things that he's going through. I know it's me. It's my fault. But I just wish he'll give me an opportunity, a chance, to get close to him, to help him get out of that circle.
A circle of gang violence Will Gomez has managed to close for a precious few here. But outside this door, he says, remains a cycle of gang violence from Los Angeles to San Salvador that shows no end seems near.